All right, if you're following along, I'm on the bottom of page 326, and now we're going to talk about the window object. All right, and the document, remember, the document is inside of the window, but there's nothing that says that your web page has to take up the entire window. There really isn't. So the window is literally everything. So the document is part of the window. We've looked at alert, we've looked at prompt. You can say window.alert or window.prompt, it'll work, but you don't need them. When you use something that's part of the document object, you must say document dot. So if you try doing a write without document dot write, just a write, you get an error message. All right. So here's some of the things that you can do with a window. I'm not going to read them to you. All right. And here are some of the methods. This I will mention to you because this is on the test. All right. You were asked, what is the focus method? If something gets the focus, so okay, let's assume here that I have this is my screen, and it says here first name, and there's a box here for my first name, last name, and there's a box for my last name, email, and there's a box for the email, and then a button here that says submit. Everybody understand that? Okay? All right. If I put in here, so I type in there Jeff, and I hit the tab key, and now I move to here. Two events take place. The first is a blur event takes place on this field because it's now not active anymore. And a focus event takes place right here. So can you understand what focus is? If you either tab to something or click in a field, that field gets the focus. The field that previously had the focus gets a blur. All right, but I don't think there's anything about blur, but there is a question in here about the focus method. It basically is, what is the method that makes a window object the active window or tab? All right, and it's focus. And again, these are not complete. This is not every single property for the window object. This is not every single method. These are the ones you'll use most often. In fact, there's a couple more on the top of the next page. All right, we're going to talk about this set interval and set timeout in a couple minutes. Now, what gets confusing to people is, if you look up on the screen here, these two things mean exactly the same thing. Window dot and self dot. What self means is, self is a word that's used in a lot of programming languages. It means what's currently active, the current thing. And sometimes it results in less code to type in self dot as opposed to something else dot. All right. So starting on the bottom of page 328, says there most web browsers allow you to open new web browser windows or tabs in addition to the browser window. All right. You looked at this before. You've already opened new windows from the window that you're in. And we had target equals underscore blank, right? You all know how to do that? All right. And they talk about that. But there's other ways that you can do it too, such as on the middle of page 327. If you look right here, this is not the way we've done it before in the blue, but this will open it up in a new window, but that window will have a name. If you just say target equals underscore blank, that's you're opening it up in an unnamed window. But here we're giving it a name. So if we wanted to reposition it on the screen, make it bigger, make it smaller, close it directly, we could use the name wiki window to do that if we wanted to. All right. So when you go in, you can do a lot of stuff. Does everybody understand? If you'd all please look at the screen. This is kind of an important concept right here. That if I click right here, would you agree that I've got the internet up and I've got a bunch of windows or a bunch of things open here? These aren't windows, these are tabs. So if I click here, I just open up a new tab. Does that make sense? But if I go down to the bottom here and I right mouse click and I choose Google Chrome,
That's a new window. There's a big difference between those. All right, opening it up as far as being a tab in an existing window or opening it up as a new window. And you can do either one. And what they talk about there in the book on the bottom of page 329 is ways that you can do this. So you use the open method, and notice you give it a URL, you give it a name, and there are options that you can use to customize it, like the size of the window. Maybe you want to open up a new window, but you want it to be real small and in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. You can do that. All right? Some of the stuff that you can use with the window.open method is shown toward the bottom half of page 330. I'm not going to read these to you, but you can see them. Some of these I already mentioned. Height, width, all right, etc. They give you an example on 331 about halfway down where the author says here, for instance, suppose you're working on a website for a company that sells printers. A user can view a page showing icons and summarized information about all printers and can click any printer for detail. That makes sense, doesn't it? You probably have seen that before. You got a bunch of thumbnails and you click on one of the thumbnails and boom, it gives you that in its own window and some information about it. You can do that using the window.open method. Now you'll notice too underneath that it says browsers actually have some security features, so there's certain things that you can't do. You can't I can't go out there and open up a window on Jesse's browser. I can't do that because if I could do that, I could maybe do something that shouldn't be done. All right. So again, starting on page 332 on the bottom of the page, you will be working in here and you will be creating your own zoom function to zoom in on something. And that's on 332 and 333 and the top of page 334. Like I said, and I know it's like, yeah, you got to say stuff like that. You're an instructor. I get it. But that said, really try to read through this stuff and make sure you understand what's happening. And if you don't, ask. Now, they talk in here, it says, a window's object's name property can be used to specify a target window, only a link, and cannot be used in Java code. Read that. There are certain security measures that are put in, for lack of better words, to try to protect you from you. To make sure, especially people who maybe aren't exactly sure what they're doing, so they don't try to do something they shouldn't try to do. Now, the author mentions this too, and I don't think this is worded very well, but you can run into a problem. Let's pretend for a second that I have created a photo gallery and I've done it with JavaScript. You click on the arrow and boom, it gets you to the next one, it gets you to the next one. But, Tony comes through there and he's all excited because it's a photo gallery of New England Patriots. So he starts clicking it like this, as fast as he can, because he wants to see how many pictures of Brady there are in there. All right? Well, sometimes the thing, basically, for lack of better words, the program can't keep up with what you're trying to do. You may have seen that before if you tried to ever work with anything on the internet. And that's what they're talking about in here. The user, it says here, the user continuously goes in and clicks images, but after a while, basically, for lack of better words, it gets stuck. All right? And that kind of thing can happen. So, to make sure that that the system is as responsive as it can be, they have you come in here and enter your own focus method on the top of page 335. Nothing is perfect. And the system will never be able to respond. It can't think as fast as you can think, but it'll do its best. All right, not only can you open a window, but since there's an open method, as shown starting on the bottom of 335, there's a close method. All right. So what you will do on 336, 337 in your book is, as it says, create a function and an event listener to close the window using the close method. I do want to mention something to you. We will talk about it, I think. But back in the olden days, like when IE8 was the main browser, Microsoft, when you worked with event listeners, did it differently than everybody else did. I know it's hard to believe Microsoft would think they're better than everybody else, but they did. Now, as time has gone on, they've jumped on the bandwagon with everybody else. So with IE9, IE10, Edge, etc., it's done the same way. But in the book, since our book is a 2015 book, which now makes it almost 3 years old, they will talk about, well, if you're using older versions of IE, you got to do this. Typically, that, again, another reason why Bootstrap 4 said, screw IE8 and IE9. They're not real browsers. We're not using them anymore. That's what a lot of this stuff, that was the impetus for doing a lot of this different kind of stuff. All right. Again, you may or may not care, but just so you have at least heard it. All right. So again, you'll do a close on 336 and 337, which brings us to 338. All right, working with timeouts and intervals. Now I get to say something here where I get to date myself. And some of these are still used. All right. Back in the day when I lived, when I first moved out, my parents didn't like the company I was keeping. So they said, stop seeing her or leave. I was gone in a half an hour. All right, got myself a place. And back in the olden days, you had this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This was your alarm clock. All right, and it had two things here. This one, typically, I think you set the alarm, and this one, you turned it off. You didn't have snooze, so if you turned it off and you went back to sleep, you were screwed. Okay? But the idea is today, we don't have that. And the reason I'm telling you is this right here, the old way, that's a set timeout. That's saying when you reach a certain time, have something happen. So up on the screen here, they talk about the set timeout method. This is on the test. All right? It's used to execute code after a specific amount of time has elapsed. You used to see back in the day, before Word got a little bit smarter, in fact, before Word, there was something called Word Perfect. And what you'd see occasionally on the screen is about every 10 minutes, if you didn't save, you'd actually see a message on the bottom of your screen in your status bar that said, Word Perfect has saved your document for you. Because it was set up that if you did not save every 10 minutes, it would save for you. So there was a timer that was set to go off every 10 minutes. All right, in much the same way, if you do a set timeout, that's what you're doing. You're saying after a certain amount of time has expired, have something happen. Think about why you might want to use this. All right, maybe what I want to have happen, I'm creating a form, let's say, on my web page. And if you screw up, I want to give you a message, but I don't want you to have to click a button to have it go away. I want a message to come up on the screen that says, you tried to enter, you tried to submit this form and you didn't put in your email address. So it comes up there for maybe 3 or 4 seconds and then it disappears. Does that make sense? I can use a timeout to have that happen. I can tell it to run where the display equals none after 3 seconds. That's typically how you do this. All right? Now, I'm not going to put it back up there again, but back in the olden days, occasionally, in fact, it happened to me this morning, not with my old type of alarm, but I've got a newer type. All right, but this morning I woke up, I set the alarm every day for 5:03. I woke up at 4:59. And I'm like, it doesn't really make sense to try to go to sleep for 4 more minutes. So I turned the alarm off. So not only is there a set timeout method, all right, but there is a clear timeout method. That cancels a timeout before it executes. So again, going back to the older example that I gave you, where it would save after 10 minutes, if I manually saved it myself, then that 10 minutes would start up again. Does that make sense? Now, sometimes you don't want something to run just once. You want it to run continuously. So instead of using a timeout, you use an interval. So if I wanted something to happen, like I gave you the example, every 10 minutes. So whereas setting the timeout is like the old time alarm clock, setting an interval is like the new type of alarm clock. You hit your snooze button, and it goes off again in 9 minutes or whatever it happens to be on your alarm clock. But you only have to set that timer once. Then you can keep hitting snooze for an hour, whatever it is. All right? So a timeout is designed basically, all right, that a timeout will execute code when a certain interval happens. All right? And you can also use an interval. So as it says here on the top of page 339, it says the set interval is similar to the set timeout, except it repeatedly executes. But it's only called once. And if you want to turn it off, you do a clear interval. So there's a set timeout, a clear timeout, a set interval, and a clear interval. You'll see these because after, in a little bit, we're going to go over our review. All 4 of those are on the test. So no set timeout, no clear timeout, no set interval, no clear interval. Right? And again, you will go through these. You will do a clear interval starting on the bottom of 339 and going on to 340 and going on to 341. So you'll have a chance to work with these. Starting on the bottom of 341, the author talks about the other 4 objects: history, location, navigator, and screen. I believe there's a question for each one of these. So the history object, also known as a history list, has all the documents that have been opened during the current web session. So you know this as well as I do, that if I come here, here's a better example. So there's where I am. If I click this, I'm not going to, but if I click this right now, it's going to go back as though I just opened up the book. In other words, it'll go back to right there. Not to the page I'm currently on, which is this part that's in here, but it'll go back. So I can keep backing up by clicking that arrow right there. Once I back up, then usually the other arrow won't be grayed out. So I can go forward. I'm using the history object to go forward and to go backward during my pages. That's what the history object is used for. Yes?
Is that also how some pages, if you refresh them and you're like halfway down the page, it'll like refresh it and it'll go through the exact same spot you were at?
What's supposed to happen, the short answer is yes. What's supposed to happen is if you go and reload a page, it's supposed to remember. The history object is also supposed to remember where you were on the page. So if that's what you're asking, yes. Does it always work that way? No. Does anything always work the way it's supposed to? Not that I know of. All right. So turning up to 342, the history object has 3 methods. You can go backwards, you can go forwards, or you can go to a certain page if you know where that is in the history list. All right. And I never mentioned this, but do you all know this? That, for instance, if I go here, right there, and I go to Google Chrome, and I go down to settings, I think it's settings, we'll find out real quick. Somewhere in here, I don't know where it is exactly, but somewhere in here, might be under advanced, but you are able to go in and clear out your history, your browser history. If you don't know this, you should do that every once in a while for a lot of reasons. I mean, I don't care where you browse to. It's none of my business. But the system keeps track of every place you've been, and it puts it into a little cookie, and it's taking up space on your system. And I've got 2 people who are second-year students, all right, Amin and Tiffany, and they have a race to see who has the slowest machine. We can be doing something, and it'll be like, I'm on step 4, and they're like, I'm still waiting for this to load. And this is a regular occurrence. And I try to tell them to go back and make sure that you are clearing out your history. That's not going to solve every problem, All right, but it can help. Another question on the test. What is the length property in the history object? The length property contains the number of documents opened during the current browser session. All right. Mine then should be at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Correct? As you can see, I've got 6 tabs, maybe 5, because I haven't gone anywhere yet with that one. And you can actually go in and program like this. History.go to history.length -1. Okay, that kind of thing. And they give you some examples on the page. There's a location object that is in your book on the top of page 343. This is on your test. They basically ask which object allows you to change to a new web page from within JavaScript code. And it is the location object. The location object has got a certain number of properties, as you can see right here, and it has a few methods. Not a lot. This is a pretty complete list if it's not complete. What you could do, have you ever seen this where you click a link and you can tell that it's redirecting you? You wanted to go to a link, but that link isn't there anymore. It redirects you to another one. That can be done through this. All right, that's just an example of what can be done. Then on 344, down toward the bottom of the page, there is a Navigator object, also on your test. Used to obtain information about the current browser. I already mentioned to you the concept of browser sniffing, where you're able to go in and figure out what kind of browser the user is using, the operating system they're using, etc. That was okay when you had basically 2 browsers. You had Netscape and you had IE. It wasn't too bad. Now there are probably 20 different browsers, and each browser has anywhere from 5 to 20 different versions. It would take you way too much time to try to write your browser sniffing code. And once you did, it would be out of date real quick anyway. But the Navigator object allows you to see this stuff, the app name, which shows the browser, the app version, which is the version of the browser they're using, the geolocation, which is the current user location. Bless you. Some of that stuff you can use, some of that the user can turn off. You probably have all had this at one time or another, where you're on a certain website and it says that they want to know your current location and you can deny or allow. If you click allow, they shouldn't be able to get your information. All right. On the top of 345, here are the rest of the properties, okay, of the Navigator object. And then on the top of page 346, they talk about the screen object. And as it mentions here, the screen object is used to obtain information about the display screen size, resolution, and color depth. This, again, is taken almost directly from your test. Or your test is taken directly from here, however you want to say it. So the screen, as it says there, these are the major properties that you have. You will do a very simple little exercise at the end of this chapter on 347 and 348. And as the author mentions here, to modify the slideshow application so that the window showing larger images is centered on the user screen. So we're talking about doing something, using something for customization purposes. All right? So I didn't do mine, but let's turn to page 352 and see if collectively, hopefully, we can go through and look at these questions that are in here, the review questions, as a class. All right. Which of the following objects is also referred to as the global object? So which is the big kahuna, so to speak? What? Try again. Which object. I would say A, because everything is under the BOM. Remember, the DOM is part of the BOM, etc. All right. It says in the browser object model, the history object is the blank object to the location. Well, we have to go back and look on our screen. I don't remember. All right. But way back on page 292, I believe it is. All right. So there's location and there's history. They are siblings. So the answer to number 2 is C, sibling. How about somebody give me number 3? Each item in the DOM tree is known as a DOM what? A, node. Number 4, which of the following is the correct syntax for accessing an element with the ID of headline? Let's first talk about what we know is wrong, okay? A is not possible because it's not get elements. So A is out. C is out because ID, the D should not be capitalized. So you know it's got to be either B or D. So which one is it and why? Number 4, is it B or is it D? B, why? Because it has the quotes around it. Those could be either single quotes or double quotes. So 4 is B. Number 5, which of the following is the correct one for the get elements by tag name? Again, let's talk about all the ones we know couldn't be possible. We were told that you couldn't have the brackets in there. So that knocks out A, and it knocks out C, and it knocks out D, which leaves B. Number 6, which of the following is the correct syntax for accessing the value of the href for the third element? All right. Well, remember that the third element is actually element what? 0, 1, 2. So we know that the only one that's in there that appears to make sense is A. Number 7, a set of connected nodes that are not part of a document are known as what? D, a document fragment. They're fragmented, all right, from the actual document itself. Number 8, which method allows you to insert a note at a position that you specify? It's not? Okay, it is D. Number 9, how do you increase the likelihood that a new window that you create will open as a new window rather than a new tab? Well, let's see. Close all open tabs in the user browser. I guess that would do it. Ensure that the method is initiated by a user action. Specify the height or width attribute. And specify the window equal true method. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it's B. All right, I'm not even sure. Hell, if that question be on your test, I'd throw it out. If I don't know it, I couldn't expect you to know it. Number 10, how do you control a new window that you have created with JavaScript code? Well, it's not A. You cannot control it. Again, not a good question. It's either B or C. I'm going to guess B, but it could be C. Number 11, one of you tell me this. To make a window the active window, what is it? What? There is no active method. Focus. All right. Number 12, what method do you use to execute code only once after a specific amount of time? Only one time. What? A, set timeout. It wouldn't be B set interval because that would keep going after each interval. Number 13. Well, that's the set interval. Number 14, the properties of which object describe the browser. What was the last one we talked about, or second last one in there? Anybody remember? Number 14? C, the Navigator object. All right. Number 15, what object allows you to change to a new unvisited web page from within the code? I think that's A, history. Number 16, what are the 6 objects that make up the BOM? They are the window, and the window has the children history, location, navigator, screen, and document. That's not on the test. 17, we've already done that. 18, there's nothing like that on the test to my knowledge. 19, you should know the difference between set timeout and set interval. We've already talked about them. And 20, if you want to know exactly how to center an image, all right, using window.open, just look at the example that's in the chapter. All right. So the hands-on, if you look in the book here, they start on the bottom of 354, but what I wanted to show you, I'm not sure why the author has you do this is one of the problems, but he does. And on 355, the first hands-on, you actually go in and you do some browser sniffing. When you run it, yours will look something like this. Now, if you're using Chrome, I think it's going to say Moz right here from Mozilla. If you're using IE, it might say MS. All right. If you use Firefox, I think it might say Firefox, but it might say Moz for that too. I don't remember, but you're doing some browser sniffing. All right. Then 5.2 on the next page. In this project, you create a function that opens a confirmation window using a button. All right. Some people would look at that, if you look on 353, and they would call that a pop-up. And you can use JavaScript to create pop-ups. Then you take this example, and in the next exercise, you set a timer so that after 5 seconds, it closes. All right. Then in 5.4, instead of using a timer, you use a close button. And they give you pictures with most of this stuff to show you how the stuff is going to look. All right. Finally, then in 5.5, a lot of people hated this exercise when they did it last year. You'll create and reference document elements as a way of generating the table of contents for a document containing the Bill of Rights. So the idea is this is what it'll look like. And when you click there, you'll jump down to that current spot that's in the document. All right. So it's early, but I'm going to give you another break. And then at 9:55, again, I have, and I don't tape these, but at 9:55, all right, I have sent all of you the test review. We will go over that test review at, let's just say, at about 9:55, 9:56. All right? So let's take a break until then, please.